Hi, so another game convention, PAX, has been taking place with lots of people being able to ask the Blizzard developers lots of questions about Battle for Azeroth. And of course, I've been looking through the responses, and often usual thing, I'm going down going, okay, we already know that, we already know that. Why are you answering these questions? A few questions come up that which we haven't got answers for. Some people quite scathing of some of the interviews, a little bit unfair. Some of the interviews obviously focusing on things like, battles and transmog and stuff like that, which is all fine, because there's a lot of people interested in that part of the game. But as a raider, I have a lot of questions myself, and always a little bit disturbing that, people seem to not ask the questions I'm really interested in. In fact, Bay was tweeting last night, he said, going through the coverage from PAX so far, the scuttlebutt was that everything had been asked already, to which I was thinking, okay, there's a load of hidden answers somewhere, and that there isn't anything else to dig into the devs about. But as he's noted himself, he's got, he says there he's got 5 pages of things not asked yet, so I'm hoping they will be. Now, I remember at BlizzCon, there's always the big interviews that get asked, by people that we know are going to be doing the interviews, and people look those interviews up. We get responses to those very, very quickly. But there are also other people that will interview them, a bit more obscure, and therefore it takes a while for the answer to feed through. And I have to thank again, there was a viewer who pointed out that there was an interview that took place where Blizzard at BlizzCon said that there wouldn't be any tier gear in Battle for Azeroth. So I was able to talk about that weeks before any of the larger channels were cottoning onto this fact, because again, it was one of those obscure interviews that comes out over time. So I'm thinking there's probably the same thing happen, because I have a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do is go through the questions to which I have not yet seen answers. I've now been able to check through some of those interviews, and I'm thinking, no, we still haven't got answers to these. So I'm going to go through my questions, and if any of you guys have come across an interview where they're answered, please share it with me, because I want to be able to do a video where I'm talking about the sort of things that we're going to have found out from PAX about Battle for Azeroth, because a lot of the big ones for me, not really there. And when I say questions answered, I want to be quite clear on this. I don't mean a question was asked and Blizzard said some words in response. Give you an example here. So one question that was asked by Sloopbag was, how will islands tie into endgame? Will we forget about them in a month since there's no scaling past Mythic? To which the response, but not the answer, was, right now they're focusing on how replayable they are. They're going to continue to support islands post-launch. There will be patches to improve it. At launch, they're mostly focusing on the difficulties and how replayable they are. That doesn't answer the question. What's really wanted of that question is, as raiders, and in particular as Mythic raiders, are we going to need to do these islands on a regular basis? I mean, look at the content. Islands looks fantastic. I've had a little go at it on when they first came out. Brilliant. Mythic Plus, big success story in Legion. Brilliant. But I resented it at various points in Legion, not least of which the start, when you've got lots of other things to do as well. You were more than encouraged to have to do lots and lots of them if you wanted to keep, if you're a Mythic Raider. So the question really is that going to be the same thing? Are we, as well as having to do all the normal raiding, are we also going to have to do the same level of Mythic Plus at various points during the expansion as we had to in Legion, as well as islands and when it comes to it, Warfronts? So that's the question I would like to have had hammered home. The response given there is not an answer to that question. It's a response, and maybe, that's reading between the lines, don't know yet. But, it's not an answer. So, the second question I would have is, what's the window for Warfront? We learnt a little bit about Warfront. So your faction turns in resources, a bit like the opening for the Gates of Anchorage, those who remember that. Your faction's turning in resources. As soon as you've turned in enough, it sort of becomes available as a thing to do. And it's not a battle royale for the whole zone or anything like that. It's, it's instanced. So it's because it's 20 people, these Warfronts. What's the window for doing them? Obviously, they're going to become available. What is the window for us to be able to do them? Is it going to be like the Mage Tower? I mean, as, again, fitting it around a schedule. I'm just thinking as raiders. As a raiding guild, obviously a 20-man thing, it seems ideal to do it as a raid group. It's going to be unfortunate that for a lot of raid groups, they're not going to have as few. You're not going to be able to get everyone in. You're going to have a roster of more than 20, particularly if you're a Mythic raiding group. But even some heroic and normal raiding guilds will have more than 20 as well. So that's a bit of an arsehole. But at least you can, 20 of you can do it as a guild group. But how long do you get to do it? Because it's already the point where you can't really plan very far in advance for doing them, because they don't become available until you've turned in the right amount of resources, and other things affect it as well. So you're already going to be going on some weeks you'll do it on this particular day, and some weeks you'll do it on this particular day, fitting it around there. So what's the size of the window we're going to get to be able to do it? That's a question that doesn't seem to have been answered. The next one, very, very important, super important. What's happening to our Legion legendaries? I've got a load of legendaries, right? Don't tell me put them in the bank. My bank's full. All right, yes, there's some stuff in there I could destroy, but it's still full. All right? Don't give me void storage either. They haven't upgraded. That's full. I like to keep there's things I have that you cannot get in the game anymore. Not my fault that Blizzard keep removing content from the game. Okay? But there are things that you cannot get anymore. I ain't throwing them away. Okay? So I need space for all these knickknacks that I collect. And the Legion Legendaries is just a massive drain on my bag and bank space. So what I would be asking is why can't we have an heirloom tab, or something, a legendary tab actually, but similar to an heirloom tab, where our legendaries just get stored in there and we can produce them whenever we want. There's no harm once this thing comes out in them even becoming account bound, is there? Obviously the ones that are class specific can only be used by that class. But the ones like Ceph as a Secret, Pride, is it really a big deal at that point that you'd be able to just pick them up on other characters as well? No. So, can someone ask a question, or has anyone asked a question on what's happened to our legendaries? Because I think that's pretty huge. We're going to need a lot of bag space to collect all this Azerite armor next expansion. The next one is how the looting is going to work in raids. So, there was a bit of a bombshell dropped at a Q&A with talking about personal loot being the way to go. But no details were forthcoming. Has anyone asked this most momentous of questions? Surely someone has. I just haven't come across a response yet. What is going on with raiding and master loot? Because we understand, okay, they've talked about using personal loot to sort of stop most guilds. Don't start talking about top guilds. Top guilds are a different thing, right? But we're talking about the guilds like 100, well outside the top 100 or 200 or even further, that do, some of whom do split runs. Obviously, as you go down the ranks, fewer and fewer guilds do them. But there are guilds, even outside the top 500, that do split raids, because it's now relatively straightforward and the rewards are very high. All you need is, for most of your players, to have a suitable alt, and they are definitely worth doing. So, in order to combat that, you could just remove master looting from normal and heroic mode. Because we're not split raiding mythics, like normal. Top guilds, of course. Most other guilds not. That would sort it, and you still have master loot in mythic. But they didn't seem to say that. They seem to be suggesting that there wouldn't be any master loot in mythic raiding either. Someone must have asked a question about that. That's super important for raiders. Haven't seen an answer. What's happening with the class-wide utility? Ian Hazakostas in the Q&A before last conceded, as I've been saying for a long time, and a lot of other people have been saying, that there was no class fantasy. There wasn't class fantasy in Legion. It was spec fantasy. Every spec had to be as if it was its own little class, which caused massive problems. And there needs to be a redressing of that. He acknowledged that it needed to be more class-wide. And he specifically acknowledged the fact that for utility abilities, that should be more class-wide as opposed to spec-wide. Well, there's little evidence of this in the alpha at the moment. There's been a lot of class development going on, front-loaded into the alpha, which is unusual. But there is little to no evidence that they are actually making these abilities class-wide and not keeping them on individual specs. What's going on there is what I would have asking. And on to a similar question. What about... So they talked about utility being class-wide, but they did give a caveat that healers' strong healing cooldowns should be only healers. So you know those cooldowns that are sort of scheduled during a fight, particularly a Mythic Raid fight, where you go, okay, when this happens, you're going to do your Spirit Link and you're going to do your Tranquility and that sort of thing. So those sorts of cooldowns should be for healers only, so you're not taking away from their role. Well, what's happening about that? Because warriors still have Rallying Cry. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I'd have asked that question as well. Now, the other thing is, so what they said in their opening presentation was that Warfronts, so you go into Warfronts, your faction's probably going to win it when you get to go in it. That's fine. And you get some bonuses, great. And it says that their Warfronts will actually have a physical change on the world. It will change the world. Now, what I would ask is, why do we care if a Wrathy changes? We're not going there except to do the Warfronts. And it's not even a popular levelling zone. Or do they mean that the changes are more widespread than just where the Warfront is? Because the only Warfront that's going to be there when it goes live is Arathi. So I'd have asked that question. Next, on to Ashara. Obviously, we've seen a lot of concept art for Ashara. We know she's going to be in. But we don't know where. Is she the final boss of the expansion? If not, where's she going to feature? Next one, I would say, Ashara on the concept art has a load of tentacles for legs. Does that mean there's going to be a significant water environment aspect to the Ashara encounter? On to Mythic Raiding. Again, a lot of this is raid, because I come from a raiding point of view. So, Ian Hazacosta said that Mythic Raiding will always give the best rewards because it requires the most, commitment and the most organisation and all that, all the stuff that comes through that. So, we know with Azerite armor, because it doesn't like Titan Forge or anything, we are going to be in a situation where the best item level Azerite armor will only be obtainable from Mythic Raids. We get that. But is that it for encouraging Mythic Raiding? Or are there going to be Azerite traits available on armor that is only available from Mythic Raiding? In other words, pieces of gear that you can only get from Mythic Raiding. I'm not saying a lot, but the odd piece of Azerite armor that is only obtainable from Mythic Raiding. Is that going to be in the game? Is that the way they're going to encourage people to do Mythic Raiding? Because I remember Asmongold, of course, some people will know, decided to stop doing the Mythic Raiding for a little while at least. And he noted that, you know, gear-wise, if gear is your motivation, it's not really a good motivation for the extra work required of Mythic Raiding. So are they going to put something in place to sync that argument so that people who are capable of doing Mythic and have the time to do it would be encouraged to do it as opposed to just staying as a Heroic Raider? That's a question I would ask. So in terms of the achievements, so we data mined the top 100 Alliance and top 100 Horde achievements for killing Mythic bosses, like getting the cutting edge on Mythic bosses. I'd be saying, are they going to be adding more rank achievements? Okay, more than just top 100 of each faction. And then the next one is, what are the plans for the raid rank board on the official forum? You know, similar to the WoW Progress one, there surely must be some sort of leaderboard on there, which has to surely include more than just the top 100. Otherwise, how are you to know if you're close or not? I know we can sort of use WoW Progress a bit, but there is sometimes always a little bit of debate about how accurate the WoW Progress one is for certain things. Whereas the official one would, of course, be totally accurate. So what are the plans for, on the official forum, being able to track where you are as a guild in that race? Will those achievements cover Asia, where the game is a little different, of course, because of shorter lockouts? You can gather gear more quickly. Are they going to be included or not? And the final one was a bit of a query brought on by a question. It should have been a follow-up question, really. So one of the developers said, "Oh, is Rathian really the last Black Dragon?" To which my instant response was, no. We met one in Legion, Ebonhorn. Very important character in the High Mountain storyline. Was a Black Dragon. Is a Black Dragon. He ain't dead. He's still there. What's that about? So those are my questions that I have not been able to find answers for. If anyone can point me to answers, preferably with links to the interview themselves, that'd be absolutely fantastic. If anyone is still able to ask any of these questions, I don't know when the whole thing finishes, probably about nowish, probably too late. then please do that as well, because, you know, I want answers to all of these questions. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with other people who might be helpful or interested. Until next time, I'll see you later.